So also today I watched two adaptations of films where I've seen other versions of these films made, but I hadn't seen these early adaptations. So that was exciting. The first one is Vincente Minnelli's Madame Bovary. So this is an interesting thing. So it's 2 hours long. It's from 1949. You're in the heart of the production code here, right? And how are you going to do Madame Bovary justice during the production code, right? For those of you who don't know the story of Madame Bovary, it's about a woman who um, cheats on her husband, basically abandons her child, um, racks up a ton of debt, and is really a terrible person, and then commits suicide. Now, the committing suicide after doing all those bad deeds probably makes it work, but um, that's the high level version of what Madame Bovary is about. Because if you've read the book, um, you understand why Emma Bovary becomes the woman she is and why she does the things she does, and you have a great empathy for her, especially in the original French. I think I read a really bad English translation, and I didn't particularly care for it. And then I read it in French when I was in a French class in college, and I thought it was way better in the original language, which means I think I read a really bad translation. Um, but the point is, the way they got around it was they did a frame narrative where James Mason plays Gustave Flaubert, um, defending his novel in an obscenity trial. He really did have an obscenity trial, and so they framed it by using his uh, arguments for why it's not an obscene book, for why they can have this movie exist within the production code structure. Really creative way to get around what's happening. I thought Jennifer Jones played a very good Emma Bovary. I know that she is kind of a love it or hate her actress, but I the only one that I don't like her in is Song of Bernadette. But I also just that movie was too much for me. Everything else I've ever seen Jennifer Jones in, I've loved her. She's a great actress and a great emotional actress, and you really need to have that when to bring Emma Bovary to life correctly. Her husband, the sort of just happy-go-lucky, not too smart doctor, is played by Van Heflin, and he is so good in this. Um, Obviously, he's one of my favorite actors. I can't think of a single thing seen him in where I didn't think he was fantastic. I think he has a very unique, easygoing presence, but he can also bring some really deep emotional trauma to his characters, like under the surface, and he definitely does that in this one. Um, and then the main, not the only, but the main sort of person she cheats with is played by Louis Jourdan, and I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my god, okay. Louis Jourdan stealing a woman from Van Heflin is a little hard. It's hard because I love both of them, but I also can see why most women would leave Van Heflin for Louis Jourdan. Um, and then he's such a rat bastard. Oh my god, he's one of the worst characters in all of cinema. I mean, literature, whatever. And Louis Jourdan is able to be both this charming fellow and a rat bastard at the same time, and so that really worked. So I don't know that the film 100% works, but I think it works as well as it can within the confines of the production code. And I gotta give it props for finding a very unique way to try to be true to the story. Um, I think the only thing that it is missing is that it really sort of makes Emma Bovary out to be a victim of male manipulation, and that's not 100% right. Um, it could have had a slightly more um, expanded look at the way in which society's expectations on upward mobility um, placed her in a strange place, as well as the way in which um, the lenders very much take advantage of this upward mobility. Um, desire. So I mean, there's other versions that I think are quite good. There was a version a couple years ago, directed by a woman that had Mia Wasikowska in it, and I thought that was really good. I mean, I normally don't like that actress, but I thought she did a good job as Emma. Um, so this was an interesting adaptation, and I definitely say you should seek it out. These are both on Filmstruck, obviously. That one might be on DVD as well. I think it is. And then the next one was the 1960 version of The Time Machine. This is directed by George Pal, and I believe Pal also directed a few years earlier the War of the Worlds. Yeah, so he did like, well, no, did he do War of the Worlds? Maybe he produced War of the Worlds. He did something with the War of the Worlds. Wrote it, produced it. Oh God, he produced 8 bajillion movies. Yeah, okay, he produced the War of the Worlds and produced and directed a handful of other sort of sci-fi fantasy type things like Tom Thumb, and The Seven Faces of Dr. Lao. That was his final film, and actually his work in cinema garnered him 7 Oscar nominations for shorts, mostly shorts actually. Wow, yeah, he did a ton of short cartoons. Um, that explains a lot about his future. So he was one of the first sort of producers to really make upscale sci-fi. You had a lot of B sci-fi, but you didn't have a lot of A-level sci-fi like The War of the Worlds and like The Time Machine. That is not to say that The Time Machine 100% works, much like the Guy Pearce version. It is ridiculous and maybe would have been better as a B movie because it is ridiculous and also very racist. Um, so Rod Taylor is the scientist who who builds this time machine, inventor, what have you, and goes off from Victorian era London into 8026 or whatever it is, and finds this utopian society that's actually being groomed as cattle to feed these underground Morlocks who survive the atomic wars. That's the plot. It's preposterous in a few different ways, but iconic as well. It's preposterous in that the only people alive, apparently, in the entire world, or at least in this London area, are white. Everyone's white. And the fact that it would be that far in the future and they'd still, have like cloth and other things and not, have invented, like, war generally brings more inventions and not destroys everything. Like Logan's Run, where they're an advanced civilization where the rest of the world was destroyed by war, but they have all this advanced technology. That makes a lot more sense to me. That said, the Morlocks are super cool. Um, would the Morlocks really be able to overrun these young, healthy people who they have been eating? I don't think so. Would they have like left all of those bones just out and about for people to look at? I also don't think so. They'd be more organized at this point. I feel like everything would be more organized than it's projected. And there's no way in hell one dude is gonna come and like save the entire society. Like that doesn't work out. Um, but this is fantasy and this is sci-fi and it doesn't have to follow logic and it can just be. And if you let all of that go, it is fun, and the visual effects that it won its Oscar for are amazing. The way the mannequin changes as the time machine goes through, great. I love that. The candle that burns down, the snail that goes around, the flowers, like all of that um, special visual effects are fantastic, and I loved them. I just wish the movie wasn't as preposterous as it is. I have not read this book though, so I don't know how it compares book wise. But I will say that at least the Guy Pearce version had some racial diversity in its depiction of the future, which is, kind of realistic, maybe just a little bit. Unless all the non-white people like got the great, technology and left the planet and let the white people just wither and die and become Morlocks who ate themselves. In which case, that's great. That's a good future. So this is The Time Machine. It's a bit preposterous. Rod Taylor's really good. Much like Joan Crawford, Rod Taylor, no matter what kind of movie he was in, he always gave it his best and never felt that he was above the material. And so he elevates it even in the sequences that are utterly preposterous. Yvette Miu Miu, on the other hand, not always the best. She's very pretty, but she tends to be not the best actress in the world. Yeah. But I will say, she had really good chemistry with Rod Taylor, even if they weren't great. Um, so, both movies are sort of hindered by when they're made, let's put it that way. But then sometimes they get remade and they're still crap. Like the new Time Machine with Guy Pearce is still crap. Just slightly less, racist crap. So this is Madame Bovary from 1949, directed by Vincente Minnelli, and this is Time Machine from 1960, directed by George Pal. They're both on Filmstruck. They're both, I think, available on DVD. You can rent them. They're available. Check them out. Mid-century adaptations of some of the great literature.